thing is, I go on base and it says no solicitation. You can get arrested. And I go, man, we can't go solicit. He goes, Joe, are you gonna let that little sign stop you from feeding your family? And I said, you're right. I said,
like
I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah.
Let's go. So we're not.
Let's Talk Assets podcast. My name is Chris A. Williams, one of your hosts. I'm joined by my co-host,
Giovanni Paradise.
and today, y'all, we have a very, very special guest, Joe Harris.
Joe Harris.
Joe, tell the people about what you do.
I'm in the real estate business. So I do all aspects of real estate. I buy and flip. I sell real estate. I'm in the mortgage business. I do some hard money lending. So anything that pertains to the real estate business.
Awesome. So, Joe, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and, a little bit about how you grew up, and, take us post-high school, what your life was like and what your plans were.
Okay. So I grew up in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Yes, sir.
Been here my entire life. Came from a family that was divorcee. So I went off with my mom. My dad was here locally. He was a captain of the Virginia Beach Police Force. Born and raised here, went to Bayside High School. And then we moved around a little bit. My mom was a little bit of a gypsy. We moved around a little bit. Single mom. We lived in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. She was, a single mom trying to make a living. Moved all around the world. And there is a kind of an unusual story, man, believe it or not.
Yes, sir.
So I lived with my father there for a while. So I lived with her. The house burned down. She didn't have anywhere to go.
Oh,
we
wow.
had to, this is on Miles Standish and
Wow.
Lake Terrace.
Yep.
So I had to leave, went and lived with my dad for a little while. My mom couldn't really afford 3 kids.
Yeah.
We had I have 2 older siblings. And when we went to go live with my father, we didn't get along with the stepmom, typical inside parent deal. And I called my mom and my brother and sister and we called and we said, hey, man, we don't like living here. Come get us. And she came down and she said, I'm going to take the kids on vacation, told my dad. And my mom was a different kind of person, man. She is not your normal person. Yeah. She came down and got us, and she met a guy from the military, and she took us to Japan.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my God.
Wow.
Parents didn't know where we were at, didn't tell anybody, and
Wow.
you can use the word kidnapped or however you want, but she took us and she was gone. We were gone.
How old were you when this?
I was probably in 3rd grade.
Oh, so you could
Wow.
remember.
Oh, I can remember exactly to this day, man. We got on a plane and we left, but she's a different bird, man.
Yeah.
She's like, she didn't, went over there, lived in Japan for 3 years, came back,
Wow.
and then my dad had never heard from me again, and then we called him like a year later, and she said, hey, we're in Japan, and of course, he got remarried and had 2, his 2 stepchildren. Mm-hmm. So then we came back, and, we did the whole single mom thing again and grew up and trying to make it like anybody else, and then, there came a point where, at some point I got out of control. My mom couldn't handle me. Mm-hmm. I grew pretty large, she can't slap me, can't do nothing. So then, and then she said, you got to go live with your dad. My dad was 6'7", 300 pounds.
Oh, my God.
I mean, I'm 6'5", so
The
my
behemoth
dad,
of a man.
he was a big dude.
Wow.
Cop. So she's like, hey, man, you got to go live with your dad. I was skipping school, just trying to, run the streets. And she said, I can't handle you. You got to go live with your dad. So went and lived with him all the way through, and then went to Bayside the whole entire time, and tried to get my stuff straight a little bit. Played a lot of sports, and and then 18 happened, and you know what happens when 18 happens? Me and my dad, we kind of got into it, and then I went to go live back with my mom, because she was single, didn't really know how to get on her feet. I had to go help her. I had to help pay the bills, and moved to Asheville, North Carolina. Went to school down there for a little bit. So we moved a little bit and kind of around. And then when, college came, I moved back in with, somebody that was very special and dear to me, which was my grandmother, which would be his mother. So moved in with her all the way through college. And, that's kind of how I got my real estate roots. My grandmother was the very first president of Hurrah before he's even called
Oh,
Hurrah.
wow.
So,
That's amazing.
Yeah. So my grandmother was in the real estate business. She was not your average, ordinary real estate agent. She's very successful. She was in the $1 Million Club before even before they called it COE.
Wow.
So
Yeah, that's a lot back then, though.
Yeah.
$1 million is nothing now.
she was selling homes for $15,000 to $20,000.
That's what I'm saying back then.
Sheesh.
Yeah,
So
that's-
she sold houses by
crazy.
candlelight. There was no MLS, and you had to get in the car and drive around and look for sales. So there was no MLS. You couldn't.
Yeah,
really,
there's
Yes,
no
no, nothing.
internet
Yeah.
before the internet.
Yeah, so she was she did very well. She tells the story. So she was the first woman business owner on the Eastern Shore in Chincoteague Island. That's where my family's from, Chincoteague.
Oh, wow.
She was the first one that had indoor plumbing, and our family goes back in self business for 5 generations. Her dad was a painter. Actually, her dad was the gas station owner, and her grandfather was a painter, and then she was a hairdresser.
Oh, wow.
And my grandfather was in the Coast Guard. So when they came down here, she was ironing clothes. And she said, man, there's got to be a better way to life than this. And she got into real estate. And anyway, she did really well growing up, and then, I was with my mom, and they were doing her thing here. So when she was doing her thing, I went and moved in with her. And, she's kind of my mentor. She was kind of like, hey, look, man, you got to get through school. Let's get your stuff straight. Yeah. She's the one that taught me a lot about credit. She's the one. I really look at her as my mother. My mom was really my sister.
Oh, wow.
Big party girl. I mean, I seen it all, done it all. Yeah. I mean, I've been around the block a few times. But have you ever seen that movie Mask?
Yeah.
My mom was the version of Cher in that movie.
Oh, wow.
So that was, we've had the bikers, and we've had the, the gangs, and we've had everything that I've seen when I was growing up, which was, was fine. It's who made me today. Yeah. I appreciate it.
Shaped you.
I appreciate it. There's nothing. And then, so, I've lived actually on 2 sides of the fence. And this is, I think, what made me today is, I've lived on that side of the fence. I've seen it. And then my grandmother was a little bit more wealthier, so I don't want to make it seem like we were always struggling. But my grandmother would always help us. Yeah. Bought us a car, bought us our clothes. She was always the one there to kind of support us. Mm-hmm. And then when I went there as a young man, she kind of mentored me and kind of taught me on what the proper thing was. So that was kind of my basic life.
Absolutely. And when you were living with grandma, you went to what college again?
Virginia Wesleyan College.
Virginia Wesleyan, and you graduated there. How old were you when you graduated?
I think I was 21.
21.
Whatever, 94.
So what was life like that for you at 21, Joe? What was life like at 21? Where was your mind at? Like, what was your plan? You got a college degree. What's life like for you?
I got a college degree. I got out, and I really didn't know what I was doing. I had a girlfriend. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, you guys are in the real estate business. I bought my first duplex.
Oh, wow.
Bought my first duplex. My wife and I lived in one side. Still own it today. So it's down at the beach. Bought it for $100,000 down on beachfront property. Yeah, beachfront property.
Shore Drive, right?
Yeah, it's on Shore Drive. Yeah, it's a great piece of property. I've owned it for 30 years. Yeah. Got married, lived in one side of it, and I realized early on. So I remember that to this day. So I charged my neighbors who I rented to from a girl I went to school with, $550, and I think my payment was $600. So it was only costing me $50. Mm-hmm. My first wife at the time, I'm divorced and I'm remarried again. And my first wife worked for a bank. She didn't make much money. Yeah. I didn't make much money. Believe it or not.
What'd you do right out of college?
So right out of college, I went and worked for a company called American Amicable, which was a door-to-door life insurance sales.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
And I will tell you that it was the best training I ever had. And I was nervous. And I was mentored with a few people, and I excelled at it. Only because, I got to tell you, for a young 21-year-old to go onto the military bases, 1, you're not allowed to solicit on there. 2, you have to have permission from the JAG. And I got mentored with a guy by the name of James Vesey, probably the best salesman I've ever met. Wow. And I met this guy, and we go out, and
what made him the best salesman, though?
You know what? I'll give you a few stories. And he was, it was amazing, this guy. So we went on. First thing is I go on base and it says no solicitation. You can get arrested. And I go, man, we can't go solicit. He goes, Joe, are you gonna let that little sign stop you from feeding your family? And I said, you're right. I said, I'm not gonna do that. Yeah. Let's go. Uh-huh. So we're knocking on the barracks door, and there was a guy who says, open up the door, and he looks at us and he goes, oh, you're American Amicable, right? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, oh, I've already heard your speech. And he started to shut the door. And James Vesey didn't put his foot in the door, but he just said, you haven't heard my speech. Mm. And I said, really? So I'm watching this guy because I'm merely just hanging on. Yeah. I was just a young kid. He was older. We walk in, he gives a speech, and he sells them. And I'm like, okay, all right, let me just backtrack. We go into another sales presentation, And, the couple says, we go into the nice young couple. And, for life insurance sales, it's what's called an intangible item. You can't see it. So nobody wants to spend money on it.
Yeah.
So especially for a young couple, they'd rather have the GT, 4GT, out there. They don't want life insurance. So we go in there and they say, hey, I'm going to smoke a cigarette. Do you mind? And James Vesey says, absolutely, I mind. And they said, I don't want you to smoke. And he takes complete control of the situation. And I learned something right there because, I'm learning, I'm observing. And I didn't do much speaking because I let him do all the speaking. And he actually takes complete control of the situation. And there's a few ways to make everybody say a yes question. You can say yes or no, but the way that he presents his package, and it was a rehearsed package that you didn't have a chance. The answer is you can't say no because, and one of the things I'll share with you guys is life and your family is the most important thing to all of us in this room.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So life insurance is for your family, right? So you get car insurance for your car, but you won't get insurance for your family. And dude, I'm telling you, man, it just hit home because now people are thinking like, you're right. The most important thing is my family. But I realized when I was there, the problem that I had is it was hard. It was a transactional business. So I would sell you, and when I would sell you, I couldn't get any referrals because you're getting transferred to Japan. You're getting transferred to, Southern California. So you're gone. Well, the first thing you do is when you leave, you drop my policy. So that means, I only get paid as long as you
get
pay
the
me.
residuals?
Correct. Only for a year. But, once you leave and, from Virginia Beach and you leave to go to Japan, you're dropping it because you want that $100 to go out and go drinking and go partying and you got a family and you want to buy the thing. So I realized early on, I said, there's got to be a better way to life than this because I have to, hunting every day is tough.
It is.
You eat what you kill.
Yep.
I'd rather be a trapper. And how can I be a trapper? How can I sit here and set the traps and just sit here and wait? I need repeat business. So I need the guys to be more local instead of very transient. Not that I don't appreciate, I love the military because almost 80% of my loans that I do are probably military.
Okay.
But because they're here local, they refer me more business. And, real estate agents are really my true clients. So, so that's what I was doing afterwards. And then what had happened at that is I realized that because it was so transient, I had to kind of I was married, getting ready to get married. And then I jumped over to the finance business. And then that's where I went to American General Finance. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. I don't even think they're in business anymore. Worked for them, and I did collections. I did car loans. I did personal loans. I did auto loans. And before you guys were even born, I actually had to literally take the modem of a phone and put it on the modem and type in the information. It goes,
I remember that.
remember those?
I'm old enough for that.
Okay.
Joe.
I'm not.
literally pulling credit. I had to pull on there. It would take about 45 seconds, and then the credit bureau would come over on a three dot printing machine.
Yep.
I had to type up all my own documents on a typewriter.
Oh my goodness, that's the struggle.
Had carbon paper.
Yeah,
Had
that's
carbon
crazy.
paper. You
Oh,
have to put it in and roll it up in carbon paper. I had what's called old ledger cards, where like if I made you a loan today and you didn't pay me next month, I had to call you. Gio, hey, I made you a loan.
Because they're going to come take that comp back?
Well, we were going to take whatever back,
Yeah.
So it could be pianos, it could be personal loans,
wow.
and then we'd secure it with personal property. So we actually had to collect on our own loans that we called. And talking about assets and stuff, I want to give some benefit to everybody listening is, I was a 21-year-old and 22 collecting from 30 and 40-year-old people.
Yeah.
And I said, man, I don't understand why these people don't pay their bills. And, I was just like, and my grandma, getting back to, was always talking to me about your credit is something. She taught me a few principles of life. Pay yourself first, always. You cannot afford it. Make sure it's a bill. Make sure you have good credit. And, keep your name and, be honest. And you don't have to worry about looking over your shoulder. So those were a few principles that she taught me. But when I went to the credit industry, I realized how these people weren't paying. And I'm like, man, you got to be kidding me. And I would look at this and I would say, this person makes $100,000. And I was making $19,000 out of college.
It's a lot of money back then.
Yeah, back then.
A lot.
$100,000 is a lot of money.
I thought to myself, if I ever made $100,000, I will let me work 5 years. I'll never work again. I was making 19 grand. And I couldn't believe how people weren't paying their bills. And that really, really hit me because I said, I'll never be in that position. And I use this with my kids today. And I have 5 children, 2 are my own. I have 3 stepchildren. Credit's like crack. And I'm a big believer in credit and my credit score and just a lot of things that I believe in. but credit is cracked. And to this day, I won't let my kids have credit cards. And they have credit cards, but they used them and they kept them. I made them authorized users when they are 18. They're on my list. They have perfect credit. I have perfect credit. And so I make sure that they do not start that whole credit thing. Because in college, I don't know if you guys have been to college, but they send you and pound you with these credit things.
Of course, yeah.
And, you know, and you can get in over your head very quickly.
That's where they make their money at, yeah.
Absolutely. So what happened is when I was in the credit business, I realized that early on. I said, man, these guys got you. 21, and I mean, I was making mortgages at 18%. I was doing these loans with interest only. I don't know if you guys know what the rule of 72 is, but when the rule of 72 is you're paying all interest at the beginning. Well, these guys were slick. You know, these companies are slick. Yeah. And I was just a guy trying to get ahead, and I wanted to be manager, and I was, I was trying to go the extra above and beyond the call of duty. Well, they would have me refinance these customers right before the 72 period was ending, right before they started hitting principal, so they could add more interest. And I'm like, oh my gosh, man, you guys are taking these guys to the cleaners. But it was like, so the usury law, I don't know if you know this, but in the state of Virginia, the usury law was 36%.
Was that back then or is that
was
now?
Back, I don't know, but that was back then.
Back
so
then.
I don't make any loans, but 36%, anything under $3,500. That's what we were making. And these guys were just clocking. I mean, it was unbelievable. But, you know, once you understand how the game's played and once you realize that if you're entrapped to the man, I call it, you will never get out. I mean, that's why people file bankruptcy, because they can never get out. They're making the minimum payments. So I realized early on, you know, this credit thing is not a good thing. Yeah. But I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't been in that business. I mean, if I was just a regular guy just going about the thing, I probably would have been, you know, had all these kind of credit cards. But because I was forced in that business where I worked there, I realized early on about how you can get trapped up in the whole game, you know. And, you know, most of the time they're buying pianos and they're buying things that, you know, they don't matter. You know, these things are just irrelevant.
Material things, not necessities.
Absolutely.
Just wants.
Absolutely. So after that, I went to American General, and then I started doing mortgages. And I was working, I literally worked in Suffolk, Virginia. I lived off Shore Drive, like what you just said. So from Shore Drive, it was an hour drive.
It's a hike.
It was on the other part of Suffolk. It was on the far, you know, where Lipton Iced Tea plant is, all the way on the other side.
Way out there.
So it was on the other side. So me and my wife were living in this place. I was driving an hour to work, and I had to be there by 8, so I had to get up at 6. I had to leave at 7. I got there at 8, and I would work until 7 or 8. I was making a lot of loans to a lot of farmers, and a lot of just, you know, Suffolk back then was real rural.
Very rural.
Making the loans, doing real well. I had just become branch manager. I felt like I got promoted. I think I was making $25,000.
This is the late 90s?
Yeah, this is probably 96, 97.
Okay.
And the reason why I think that's important is just to establish timeline for those that are in real estate to understand where you're at in all these cycles.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Making loans at
interest
18%. 18%.
18%.
Yeah.
18%.
We were doing first and seconds. We were doing like that. And it was, you know, being in the business, you realize early on, and you're like, okay, so, and I'm going to, once you get out there, you realize these farmers, you know, are out there and you know, they don't know any better. They don't know how to pay. And then, of course, they get in some trouble. And sometimes people would pay you off and then life would be good. But when I was out there, I was working extremely hard because I wanted to get ahead. I was very driven. And 2 stories. One, my boss calls me. And I was always the guy who would turn the branches around. You know, I don't want to say, you know, I was a jerk, but I ran a tight ship. You're going to be at work. We're going to do our job. We're going to get it to go. And I was driven. I wanted to be a manager. So I ended up taking over all the branches that were falling apart, you know, because you got to lend your way out of delinquency. You can't just not lend. You have to go make loans, and then you have to collect. So collection was a big part of delinquency. So delinquencies would be anywhere from 5 to 10%. You lower, they'd be better, but you could literally lend yourself out of there. How I got into the actual mortgage business, even though I made mortgages full time, is I was working really hard, and my buddy calls me, and he worked for me, and he left, and he went to household finance, and he goes, man, you ain't gonna believe it. I made $10,000. And I said, you made $10,000? I make $30,000 a year. At the time, it went from 25 to 30. I said, I make $30,000 a year. You made $10,000 in 1 month, and a third of what I made all year. I said, man, you do that again. Let me see it. And I said, let me see. So he sent me over the paycheck. I looked at it. I was like, that was just lucky. And he said, I said, you do it again. Let me know. So then next month, boom, he said, man, I'm killing over here. He sent it to me again. I said, you've got to be kidding me. My boss called me, and I got in, and that day I had 10 loans, like 2 mortgages collecting. It was month end. And my boss he calls me, he says, hey man, where's my reports I was supposed to have at 8 o'clock? I go, Mickey, his name was Mickey Williams. I go, Mickey, I got 10 loans. I got 2 mortgages. I got people. I don't know if I can make it. He goes, what time did you get in? I go, 8 o'clock like I'm supposed to. He goes, well, get in earlier. And I looked at him, and my buddy, and I had already interviewed with them. And I said, you do it again, I'm gone. I called Mickey. I said, Mickey, come get the keys. I quit because I already had the job, and I quit, and I went over there full time. And then all I did was mortgages.
Residential?
So, residential mortgages, yeah.
So 4 units and under?
Yes, yeah.
I didn't know how the laws were back then.
Yeah, it was 4 units.
4 units
still.
and under back then. Okay.
But one was a finance company, one was a mortgage company. But it's working for the man. I was working like a slave. I mean, it was unbelievable how hard I was working.
And where did you acquire real estate? When did you start acquiring property?
Started acquiring. I got the duplex right off. But I want to tell you one other story. So when I was at American General, people, how I started to flip, and I think this is an important factor because this was a career changing in my life. I was at American General in Suffolk. And a guy came in, they called him Slim, tall, black guy. He's taller than me, so he must have been, he was probably 6'8", 6'9".
Wow.
And he didn't know how to read and write. So he came into my office, and he wanted $250,000. And at that time, that was over my loan limit, so I couldn't sign off on it. So I had to call my boss, and I go, hey, man, this guy wants $250,000. He has a bunch of houses, and, of course, it has to be reviewed by upper management. My boss signed off on it, and I made this guy a loan. And I asked him, I said, man, how do you do it? He owned his own trucking company. And Slim and I became pretty good friends because I'm giving him money. He would always come in. And when you didn't know how to read and write, I had to have a notary next to me or a witness, and then he just signs with an X. But people that are from the country and the farmers, their word to their bond. They come in and they handshake. He was going to pay me. And a lot of people work for Smithfield, Foods and Smithfield Hams. But I asked him, I said, how'd you do it? And he goes, well, I buy a bunch of properties in Suffolk. I buy them for 10, 12 grand, put 10 grand into them, and I rent them out and do it. And he owned like 60 of them.
Wow.
And he owned all these properties in the rough area. I'm not sure how familiar you are with Suffolk, but
Yeah,
East Washington
East
Street.
Washington, yep.
I mean,
I own a house over there.
Yeah. East Washington is pretty tough.
Yep.
They're building it up now.
Yeah, it is nice. And I've been all through there because I had to collect. I literally had to knock on the door.
That's
and collect.
insane. It's a lot different than today.
Absolutely. Yeah,
It takes a little bit of gall to do that.
I wouldn't do it. But he owned all these houses, and I just gave the guy $250,000. And from that day on, from that time, I flipped my first house. And I don't know what it was, but I said, if he can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
If he can flip a house and the guy don't know how to read and write, I can do it. Not that I'm smarter than him, but I'm telling you, I know that I have enough confidence in myself. I can do it. So that's kind of how I got into flipping business. And then from that point on, that's going to relate to what you had just mentioned to me. I started acquiring property then. Okay. I would buy property and fix it up and flip it. And, real estate's always been kind to me. And I don't want to say I've never lost money, but I've really never lost money. I've broken even, but I don't think I've ever really lost money.
What was your strategy back then, Joe, when you were acquiring property? Were you buying them straight cash? Were you taking loans? Were you flipping them, meaning you were putting money in and reselling them, or you're putting money in and holding on to them? What was the strategy?
I would do both. So okay. I would, my house, I was very, good. I was blessed to have a duplex, and I was able to get some money. Then I was able to, so the one, it's pay cash for a lot of them. It depends on the value. So I bought a house off of Portsmouth Boulevard for 25 grand. It probably needed 25 grand worth of work. I think, I sold it for 100, so I had 50 in it. I sold it, and that was one of my very first flips. Nice. So I hired my contractor, got his tools stolen. And back then they didn't have internet. So I actually had to get a phone line to get an alarm system, installed.
Wow. Yeah.
So I got a phone system with the alarm, got all that done. It was broken in 2 or 3 times. Of course, they would hear I put in new windows, and then, that's where I made a critical mistake. I put in a new AC unit. Before the house was finished, they stole the whole unit.
Stole the whole. Oh wow!
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was an inside job, but they sold the whole thing. So from there on, I would never put in an AC unit until the end. But you learn those things as you go through. That was a house that I flipped, and I wanted to make sure, but it had literally had a hole in the ceiling.
What did you do with the money? Because you obviously made money, right?
That's a great question. I did make money. I just pretty much normally just invested and buy more property. I would normally just take my money and buy more property. I have a different, we were talking about before the program started. I don't look as money as everybody else. I look as money. I don't look at flashy things. Things are golden. The flash goes away. I don't want to say I'm conservative because I spend a lot of money and do all the things that I want to do, but I have a principal rule that I don't buy things that depreciate in value. I don't buy cars that depreciate in value. I never will. I buy 1 or 2 years old cars. I don't buy new cars. I don't buy, I don't buy a lot of clothes. I don't buy a lot of furniture. I buy houses, I buy houses.
I love it.
Income producing assets.
Yeah. Well,
So that leads me to a question too. What would be your favorite asset that you own then?
houses. The houses help me get to where I want to be. And, I don't look at the guy who has, we talked about earlier with the 3-piece suit and driving a Porsche, and he's got to report to the man. I don't report to anybody. And I'm not saying that in a bragging way.
No, that's a very valuable lesson, Joe.
To me, I think it's the most important lesson. And, everybody listening and, they get caught up in all this money. And, $100,000 is a lot of money to a person. I'll give you another example. I bought another duplex, which you're familiar with. I bought that same duplex, and I bought it for that one. I bought for $125,000. It was kind of like about a year later, and this was back in late '90s. Okay. I was offered $100,000 1 month later from the time I bought it from a builder, and it's a local builder right now. Mm-hmm. And I looked at my grandma and I said, "Nana, you ain't gonna believe." And her name was Nana, or Elizabeth Harris. I said, "Nana, you ain't gonna believe this. Somebody's offered me $100,000 a month later." And she said, "Joe, I want you to think about this. If it's worth $200 now, it'll be worth $400 in 20 years."
Yep.
And I said,
"We're more than that now, right?"
It's worth 600 plus. Yeah. I said, "You know what? You got a point." Yeah. I didn't sell it. Now, how hard was that for me to have discipline? I might have been 25, brand new married, maybe had a baby at that time, and I was being offered $100,000 in cash. And I said,
"Think long term though."
I did, but that's hard to do.
That's very tough to do. Back then, $100,000, even today, $100,000 is a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, man. And I said, "You know what? You're right." And I just kept it, and I kept renting, and I've owned it ever since. But it was a good ride, But I would say that the assets allows me to do whatever I want to do. And for me, freedom means everything. Yeah. So, I've worked for big corporations. I've worked for Countrywide, I was a regional manager. I traveled. I worked for the thing. And I would have to say that kind of is the thing that, everybody listening, it was a good ride. Mm-hmm. But I will tell you that corporate America, when the time came, they let me go. And, at the time I was making $500,000 plus. Mm-hmm. And that was a lot of money back then. I mean, I couldn't leave that job.
It's a lot of money now, Jim.
I couldn't leave that. I couldn't leave that job and go anywhere else. They let me go, and I gave my heart and soul to that company. I mean, I was doing $1 billion a year in lending, $1 billion.
That's insane.
I had 17 offices. I had all of, part of Virginia, all of North Carolina, all of South Carolina, all of Tennessee, and all of Kentucky.
And how did that feel? Like, I mean, obviously, billion is nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah.
So,
amazing.
Walk me through that. I mean, you build a company up, you're doing $1 billion in revenue annually, and they let you go. Walk me through that moment, what you felt, and the lesson you learned from it.
Building that was a lot of hard work. And my wife, when you're making $500,000 or whatever, I mean, I'll never forget my very first bonus check for the month was $80,000. And I, and it comes very natural to me. And some of my best friends that all went to high school with me, all my buddies, I got them all in the business. I said, "You ain't going to believe the amount of money I'm making. Mm-hmm. You've got to come work here." Some would work out, but, you still have to have the gift of gab. You got to know how to talk to people. You got to know how to read them. They didn't go through the hard knocks I went through. Yeah. Talking about hard knocks, they didn't go through door-to-door sales. You go through door-to-door sales, you know how to read people real quick.
Yep.
I mean, I'll tell you what, if you've never done door-to-door sales, you learn sales real quick. How to break down that barriers and meet people. So some of my friends made it, some of my friends different. We were all making a ton of money back at that time. I mean, it was money hand over fist.
This is before the mortgage industry became highly regulated.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it came
you were doing no-doc loans back then?
Absolutely. Yep. No-doc loans, stated loans, NINA loans. We've done it all.
And can you walk through people that are watching this podcast that aren't in real estate? What is a no-doc loan?
A no-doc loan is no income, no asset. We call it a NINA, stated income, stated asset loans. They basically were based on their credit only. So, we're going to look at you and go, what's your credit? You seem to be a good person, and then we would basically base the information on what they told us.
Wow. So I could tell you I make $1 million a year with no checks at all?
Correct.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's how the crisis happened, right, Joe?
Yeah.
That is.
Walk us through that, because you're a mortgage guy. Yeah. And let's talk about the crash. And because a lot of people, you've been hearing this since I started my company, everyone's been talking about the crash.
The impending
crash.
crash.
It's going to impending crash. Well, what's so different now than back then what caused the crash, in your opinion?
Yeah. The banks got greedy, and the banks were buying these high security bonds. So they were taking all of these loans, and at the time, everybody was making money so that everybody was making their payments, and the default rates weren't up. So they would take all these loans and they would package them in to the bond program, and the banks were buying them. Well, they got a little greedy, and they were selling them as AAA bonds, and not knowing that these things were NINAs and SISAs and kind of some speculation. And listen, I will tell you that I made my fair share of bad loans. I mean, but I was being pushed from upper management to make these loans. If I didn't do better this month than I did last month, I'd get written up. So, I mean, it was a drive thing. So,
Wow. A lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure.
And I was making $500,000. So, I mean, life was good. Everybody's making money.
Great.
But I will tell you that the difference now is back then, the bond system. First of all, we're now requiring people to put their own money down. We were doing down 100% purchases down to 520 credit scores.
Wow.
Is it 100% what, loan to value?
Yes,
That's
100% purchases up to. The other thing too is what many people don't know as investors like us. A lot of my older friends had 50 and 60 and 70 houses. I'm like, how'd you get that many houses? Because Fannie and Freddie now have implemented where you can only have 10 properties. Fannie and Freddie will only finance 10 properties, probably one primary, maybe 10 investments. Where back in the days, you didn't need that. You could go to Fannie and Freddie and have 100.
And for people watching, Fannie and Freddie government-backed.
Government-backed securities are two government entities that buy basically the mortgages, and they buy conventionals. So anyway, when that happens, people got greedy and they were making loans down to 520, 100%. I mean, we were sitting there watching it and we would just be laughing. We're like, this person's going to get 100% loan, no money down. So what happened is when delinquency and everything went up, it was very easy for somebody to take the keys and go, take the keys. I don't want the house, because they had no money.
These are non-recourse loans too, or
yeah? I mean, it was just done. Yeah,
they had personal guarantees back then.
No,
that's insane.
You just hand over the keys. Literally, they were handing over the keys and saying, "Take my thing." So that's why the people listening, people don't understand why more money has to be put down for an investment property. You're more likely to hand over the keys to an investment property because I live in this house and this is where my family lives. Yeah. So investment properties like take the keys. I'm okay with you losing the investment property, but I don't want to lose my primary. So that's why we want more skin in the game. Okay. The actual primary, when you have these things, they're less likely. There's more pride and ownership. People are not going to take care of the. We know how renters are. They're just going to beat up the property and everything. So. But the difference is the bond market now, the banks are now requiring, one, we have credit criteria. 2008, when everything went 2008 and we had the housing boom, then it became regulated. So before 2008, I didn't have to be a licensed mortgage loan officer.
Really?
No.
It was unregulated.
Unregulated.
That's so crazy.
That's wild, wild west.
So then once 2008 hit, I had to go get licensed. So then I had to take the test and go get licensed, and then the rest is history. But it was very unregulated; anybody could do it. They didn't look at any type of backgrounds. Yeah. I mean, there would be people that would come in. I was like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" They're like, "I'm a pizza guy." I'm like, "What do you do now?" I'm a mortgage loan officer. I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" I mean, there were guys
quite an upgrade, right?
Yes, but there were people out there that had fraud. There was a lot of fraud in that
back
business.
then, yeah.
Well, there were people that, now if there's automatically cancel if you have any type of embezzlement, any type of forgery, any type of stealing. You can't even be a loan officer.
Absolutely.
You can have a DUI. You can have anything that's non-course of financial related.
Non-white collar.
Yes. You can actually can be a mortgage loan officer. And you might have to write a thing if you have bad credit. You might have to write a scenario.
Yeah.
But before that, anybody with bad credit, forgery, crooks.
Didn't matter.
Didn't matter. You could make loans.
I got a good question for you, Joe. How'd you weather the storm? Because most people in the real estate industry, and, I've been in the business quite some time, a lot of people will tell you their horror stories, how they lost everything.
Yeah.
How'd you weather the storm, Joe?
I weathered the storm because I lived below my means. And I give every new loan officer the exact same advice I'll give you and everybody listening. The biggest financial freedom is having a house that's free and clear and paying off your house. And I never lived over my means. And I told you, I'm not into the shiny objects. I mean, I could have had the Mercedes. I could have had a bigger house. I lived in the same exact house I lived in for 20 years. And my wife at the time had almost convinced me to buy $1 million house. And we were looking at $1 million house in 2008.
Ooh.
Thank God in Ridgely Manor. And thank God I didn't buy it, because then everything collapsed. And I mean, I didn't drive a Mercedes, but in my Virginia Beach branch, we had about 30 loan officers, and it was like the boiler room. I mean, it was dial for dollars. Everybody was dialing. It was exciting, and we'd all do the fun things. I was the only one in that branch that didn't have a brand new car and a brand new house. out of 30 people. And
That's insane.
these people were 21 and 22 years old.
Wow.
But I weathered the storm because I didn't live above my means. I had the same house, the same cars, and I stocked away a ton of cash. And when I stocked away a ton of cash, I tell everybody, I said, there's no better feeling like, when the new loan officers come to me, they all want to do what I do. And I said, man, this is easy, but it's not that easy. I said, what's your monthly nut? And they'll say 5,000. I go, well, this ain't the right job for you because I made $1,000 a month. What are you going to do? How are you going to feed your family? This ain't the right job for you. So I tell people, I say, you got to have low bills and low expenses, and then you got to live below your means. And I tell everybody this because they all make the same mistake. We're having that same problem right now. These loan officers the past few years have made big bucks.
Yep. Corporate rates, all that.
Corporate rates, dude, I'm telling you, it's starting to shrink.
Tightening up.
The market's tightening.
Yep.
I mean, I know inflation,
Yep.
but really the market. So, we're doing about a third of the mortgage originations nationwide that we were doing just 3 years ago. Well, these, my peers are buying, I just look at them, shake my head, and I give everybody the same advice. And I say, guys, you're buying $1 million second home. This mortgage stuff is not going to last 30 years. It may last 3, then it goes down, then it goes back up, then it goes
The
down.
ebbs and flows because you've been in the game that long.
Exactly.
You're talking
experience
about.
enough.
You're talking about history repeats itself.
Well,
right?
these people haven't been around since 2008, and I have. And I keep telling them, I say, guys, I'm telling you, you're making a big mistake. You keep going out and buying all these things. I mean, they're buying $1 million homes, $1 million second homes. I'm like, I mean, you're doing well now, but I don't think, that mortgage payment got to last for 30 years. Yeah. I mean, I don't think you're going to sell mortgages like this for 30 years. It's just not going to happen. And sure enough, that's what's happening. So now we're starting to compress, and market compression is going to be a little bit of time constraint. So
yeah, absolutely. I have a similar background as far as your door-to-door sales. I'm a career salesman. I sold cars, timeshare, then real estate. But in timeshare, they taught us this financial principle. And what's so funny, because your story resonates with mine, is when I started working in timeshare, I was 22, 23. I was very young. And I'd just gotten a big credit card. And the first thing I went from a $1,000 credit card to a $7,000. I maxed it out in like 60 days. I went on vacation, did this, did that. And before you know it, I was like, I have this $7,000 credit card. I was selling cars, and I was just making the minimum payment. And I just kept looking at my statement. I'm like, I'm not paying any of this down. I'm like, what's going on? And then I learned, the interest, was killing me. That you have to make more than you spend, or spend less than you earn.
absolutely.
That's the only way to get ahead in life. Make more than you spend, or you spend less than you earn. And so that's a very valuable lesson that I learned the hard way. I got myself out of that debt very quickly when I started doing well in timeshare, but that really entraps people.
Yes.
It inhibits growth. And the reason why I asked you when you flipped what you did with the money is you were conservative, is you didn't upgrade your lifestyle. Nothing in this story when you were on your journey, I heard I flipped this house, I went and bought a car. I flipped this house, I went and bought this mansion. You know what I mean? I went and bought these toys. Back then, you were in the building phase.
Yes.
And I think that's so hard for people. And the biggest lesson that I've learned from talking to you is, as you're continuing to make good money, is being able to have that discipline and, not increasing your lifestyle, and rather keep increasing your assets and increasing your cash flow. That way, when the storm comes, you weather it, and then when you come out on the other side, you can kind of still keep going. And is that what happened to you? Like, obviously, the recession didn't last
That's
forever.
exactly what happened. But I can tell you that, when you have it, one of the things that, everybody likes to look at their car, right? You go out there, if you have a brand new car, I like to look at my money. And
I like that.
I like to look at my money, and
I
I
like
look
that.
at it, and I don't look at it every day, but it's pretty close. And I like to look, the other day, the Dow lost 500 points. I lost like 15 grand. That's okay. It's on paper, but I like to look at my money, and I like to watch it grow. So that's exciting for me. And, when people have never had that background, my grandma, I was telling you, would always say, save money, save money, save money. Yeah. One of the things that, we talked about is not only have I saved, a great deal of money, but I also went through the .com era.
Oh, wow.
I mean, so I had the .com bust. I went through the housing bubble. So they call this the decade of losses, but I've always been a big saver, to try and build assets. But the thing is now that I've seen it over the years, if you put enough money away, it's going to grow naturally, right? Even if it goes down and up and down and up, and you watch it. But the thing is now my money's working for me. And to me, that's financial freedom. And that's what this podcast is all about. I'm trying to educate other people when, don't go out and buy the new car just because you got the money, but save it for a rainy day, because, pressure kills. that stress of level of producing and making money will kill
Covering
you.
that nut, right?
And, dude, it's a huge. And once you have that financial freedom, it is the biggest stress reliever you'll ever have in your life. And to me, that means more than anything. So
Can you elaborate what you just said? You said my money works for me.
absolutely.
So what does that mean? Explain it for people.
So I have several forms of income, and I've already expressed, a few things, but now I lend my own money out. So we can call it hard money lending or whatever, but I lend my money out. And you and I have talked where I act as the bank. So I've sold several of my houses and I act as the bank, and to me, that is the greatest investment or piece of asset that I own. And I know it's a house, but when I own the house and I accumulate the wealth, then I turn around and sell it. There's a few properties I'm making 10% interest only on my money. I'll tell you this, man. I mean, that's
secured by the real estate.
Secured by the real estate. So I never do unsecured debts. So I'm not going to do that. It's always secured. But when I secure it against a debt, I have a $2,000. I'm always thinking what will pay me for the rest of my life. So that $2,000 that the guy pays me. So I bought a house for 160. I sold it to him for 230. House is probably worth 300. I gave him some cash to fix it up. But I financed it. I did basically a NINA loan, but I knew he was going to pay me back, because if I don't, I'll take it.
Yeah.
I signed everything, and then but see, for me, $2,000 a month for the next 30 years and that's a lot of money to me.
It's valuable.
Well, if I do that 10 times, now it's 20 grand. So now I don't have to get up and work anymore, right? I don't have to worry about somebody telling me
You
and
make
whipping
money
me.
when you sleep, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Your passive income. Keeps you
Absolutely.
active.
And that's what I'm always looking for. I need passive income. I need things. I remember I told you instantly, I don't want to be the hunter. I want to be the trapper. So how can I be a trapper and wake up and trap my meals instead of hunting every day? Because hunting every day is hard.
Yeah.
So now that I've done that, 5, 6, 7 times, that's how I make my money.
I love that. Yeah. So walk us through, Joe, what does a day in the life of Joe Harris look like today? I mean, you've been in this game a long time. You've kind of made your money, but you're still going.
Right.
I see you on social media. I follow a lot of people in the real estate industry on Facebook. I see you have a lot going on. What keeps you going, and what is your day-to-day like now?
Well, I have 5 children. They're all grown, so we're empty nesters. It's me and my wife.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yes, sir.
They're all, most of them are in college, so one of them's out. So, they all go to 5 private schools. It's very expensive. One of the things, so my daily life is I get up, I go to I work from home. I have a dog. It's my best friend, and I work from home, and I love working from home. I got to tell you, but I don't work for anybody. Nobody tells me what to do. I have no boss. And for me, maybe I'm stubborn. My wife calls me stubborn, but I don't take orders very well. Not that I'm the smartest guy in the world, but I feel like if I'm going to mess up, I want it to be me, right?
Yeah.
I don't want you to tell me to do something and I mess up. But I get up and I work, and my primary business is the mortgage business, and I do very well at it, but it comes easy to me. So I will never give up what I do just because it's easy. And I've been doing it such a long time. So I've empowered the people around me. So for my 8 businesses, I have a broker that runs my broker shop. I have a property manager. I have a lawyer that runs my 2 title companies. I have a builder, the Class A contractor that runs my building company. And then I have me who runs my mortgage company. And then at my commercial building is me as well. So, I have empowered the people around me who've been with me for a long time. So, my partner and I have been together for 10 years on the real estate and property management. My mortgage guy's been with me for 23 years. I got him in the business. So he's been with me for 20 years. So I've empowered the people around me to do the job. I don't want to say that I don't work, because I work very hard. I just work differently. I feed the monster. I go out and I go get the business, but I don't do any more paperwork. Me chasing down pay stubs and chasing down clients and getting the keys and lock boxes, I don't do that anymore.
Absolutely.
So I am the head of the snake per se. I just go out and round up the business, and I feed the monster.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Joe, you talked about this amazing lifestyle that you built for yourself, and congrats to you for
Thank
that.
you.
That's amazing. But let's go back a bit to you when you first started, 30 years ago, Joe, when you first started. If you could give advice to yourself back then, what's one piece of advice you would give to yourself?
I would have worked for myself a lot longer, because I have enough confidence in my ability. And, working for corporate America was nice, but they'll burn you in a second. And I'm not saying that was a great start, and they trained me and taught and, would teach me. But I have enough confidence in my ability. I would have worked for myself a lot longer. But it's worked out for the right reasons.
And don't worry about that. Well, I want to get a few more things. You said something so powerful earlier, just now. It resonated with me about empowering people. You empower them. Yeah. What does that mean for people out here, entrepreneurs? Because I feel like that's a big part of what's missing for newer entrepreneurs. I'm a newer entrepreneur myself when it comes to scaling a company, scaling a business, because there's no way that Joe Harris runs all those companies on a day-to-day basis. You've empowered people. Walk me through, because it didn't start that way.
No. That's a great point I'm going to give you. So when I was a loan officer, I was doing 1 to 3 loans a month, and I didn't want to give up, part of my income, because I have to pay for my assistant. I have to pay for my people. Yeah. And one of the things and I love stories, and I'll tell you another story. So I was doing $1 million a month in loans, which would be about 5 loans a month. And there was a guy in the office, and he was out playing golf and doing all these things, and he was doing $3 million. And I'm like, how is this guy doing this? I'm like, this is impossible. So I asked him one day, he goes, man, there's not the power of an assistant. And that goes back to my assistant. He's now my partner, by the way. Yeah. Doug Bills is now my partner. He's been with me for 23 years. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
He started off as my assistant. Yeah. Now he's been with me and he's been loyal with me. So he earned his way into being my partner. Mm-hmm. So him and I split everything dead down the center. And it wasn't like that. It was only like that 2 years ago. But he was with me, and I learned and I empowered to give him part of my money. And he does all the work. And part of the thing is you have these loan officers that are very control freaks. So I empower the people to do do their job. And if they can't do the job, then I need to hire somebody else. Mm-hmm. But all my people know their job. I never have to look over my shoulder, and they just know how to do their job. And if they don't, then we need to talk about it. We need to educate them and train them and teach them and coach them, right? Yeah. That's what we do. And then hopefully I get the right person. But you lose that one. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever lose Doug, and I hope I don't. But he's a very important part of my business. But
kind of piggybacking off what you said, and this is someone that's more seasoned in business told me that you can have growth and you can have control, but you can't have both of them.
That's right. That's right. Well, we ended up getting, I like the idea of giving the people the power. Mm-hmm. Go ahead and look, do your thing, do it. And then maybe they'll come up with some creative ideas, but I don't have time to sit here and micromanage you or micromanage this person. I'm off running this way. I mean, I'm running 1,000,000 miles, this way. I tell people my train moves fast. You're either going to hop on it or you can get run over, and I don't mean that in an arrogant way, but my train moves very fast. Yeah. So I run an assembly line. My assembly line runs very simple. I do this. I go get the business. My assistant does all the paperwork. Doug takes all the loans out the back door. Uh-huh. And then my processor, I do have a processor that processes loans, but everybody has their designated, job.
Can you say that saying for us again?
My train moves fast, and if you're not going to jump on, you can get run over.
I love that. I just wanted to have that on recording again. Yeah. No, that's beautiful. That's a very valuable lesson in business when you talked about that assembly line. That's your SOPs, your order of operations, and everything's that's how you built a business that can survive without you. Because like you said, a lot of people start a business and they're just kind of employees. Yeah.
Absolutely.
They're a slave to their business. Mm-hmm. Again, kind of piggies back what I'm learning from hearing you say is be keeping your lifestyle down because you said, hey, it's all about what's your nut. So if I have to go make this amount because my lifestyle, that's a level of stress, it affects my quality of life. And the reason why I got to be an entrepreneur is so I don't have to answer to nobody. Yeah. Even my own business. Because some people have to show up every morning or they're not going to make any money.
Right.
It seems like you've set up systems now at where you're at, your stage in life, where the business continues to generate money.
Sure.
And so you can go to golf, right?
That's right.
Because golfing is part of what? Generating business for you.
Absolutely.
And you have your team in place that'll help monetize and give that high level of customer service for you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Just kind of before we wrap up, this is something new that we did on our last episode. We want to give the guests, because this has been a whole episode of us interrogating you, Joe, for you to ask Chris and ask me one question each, of whatever you want.
Okay. I'll start with you, Gio.
Okay.
My question to you, and you can only pick one.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you hate to lose or do you love to win? Which one do you choose?
I hate to lose.
Okay.
I hate to lose.
And why?
I feel like money is not a strong enough factor in business to keep going. I mean, you're still going. You've made your money, right? But it's about playing the game. It's the sport. We're sales guys. We're wired in a way where, that instant gratification is cool, but I think that the losses have motivated me more than my wins.
Okay.
And so me failing, I always have that saying, you got to fall forward, fail forward. That's what keeps me going. So I hate to lose. So when I go to an appointment, when I don't close a deal, that makes me, have to work that much harder to improve, to get better.
It's fair. It's a good answer.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I actually feel the same way.
Okay.
Because when I would lose, I'd cry.
Oh,
and
man, I love
I'm very competitive.
I love it.
And I don't care what it is. I never let my kids win anything. I mean, they're gonna have
Monopoly,
to beat me.
nothing.
Not nothing. Not one thing will I ever let them win, and they're gonna have to beat me because I came from a very competitive family. We're a big, huge game people, and dude, if you didn't win, you sat there and watched. So even at your early age, we're very competitive. I mean, it got intense too. Yeah. So I ask every single elderly, wiser person the same question. Even to this day, if you had one thing to change, money doesn't matter, what would you change in your life today?
Oh, that's very good. I love that.
Dang, I'm going to have to think about that for a minute. If I had one thing to change.
If money didn't matter?
Money didn't matter.
You had one thing to change. No pressure. Oh, man. No pressure, Chris.
Man, I know I got a time. I can think of the Jeopardy theme in my head right now.
The Jeopardy theme? And Jeopardy, you lose money if you don't answer.
Yeah, man. The crazy thing about that is I actually wouldn't change anything. As crazy as that sounds,
good
right?
Answer.
But the reason I wouldn't change anything is because everything that's happened to me up to this point, everything that is currently happening is going to lead me to my future destiny. So if I, try to manually overtake it or something, it may lead me to a different destination than what I'm supposed to. So I'm just sitting back, trusting in God's plan, having faith, and also putting in the work. So I actually wouldn't change anything.
That's
as crazy as that sounds.
That's fair.
I love it.
That's a good answer.
I love it. So for everyone watching, we've heard your story. We've heard the ups and downs, where you're at in business, how seasoned you are. Tell them, what's the name of your mortgage company?
Home Free Mortgage.
Home Free Mortgage.
Yeah.
If people want to reach out and contact you for business, for Home Free Mortgage, how do they get a hold of you, Joe?
Just go to homefreemortgage.com. You can get on there. And so I've been around. I've been doing it for 30 years. It's not hard to find me.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. For those who don't know, I know a lot of people know you in the community. You can follow Joe on Facebook, send him a message. If you have any questions about mortgage or anything real estate related, Joe Harris on Facebook.
Absolutely.
Awesome, man. Well, we really appreciate you spending time out of your evening with us, dropping all this wisdom to the community, giving entrepreneurs
Absolutely. Thank you.
A chance to continue to grow. So thank you, Joe.